Hello, everyone, in 93. This is the seventh in a series of discussions entitled Tarot, the Major Arcana, and the Paths of Return. In this discussion, we will be talking about Atu 15, the Devil card, path number 26. We talked about that earlier. If you want to know what path a card is attributed to, just add 11 to the Atu's number, and you can find the path that it's attributed to. In previous classes, we have discussed the paths 32, 31, 30, 29, 28, and 27. All these paths have to do with the personality, where the aspirant will work on themselves, their body, their emotions, and their thoughts, preparing themselves for the journey for higher spiritual awareness, higher spiritual vibration, and experience. When the initiate first starts their path, or the aspirant first starts their path, of course they're bound in the material world. Their spirit is silenced by the material world. Through working on these paths of the personality, the aspirant brings into harmony and equilibrium various aspects of himself, his thoughts, his emotions, and his body. The conflicts are now resolved. Equilibrium is now attained, and the aspirant is prepared now to continue his journey into higher spiritual realms of consciousness and vibration. This path that we'll be discussing today is one of the first paths leading out of the personality into the spiritual consciousness. This path goes from Hod to Tipperith, the personal intellect to the spiritual intellect. Interestingly enough, when you take the number of this card, 15, and add it, it comes to 6. 6 is the number of the sun of Tipperith, showing the relationship of the sun hidden in matter. This is the Devil card. The title of this card is the Lord of the Gates of Matter. So he is the Lord of the Gates of Matter, meaning that he would be like the initiator as you go through the 4 gates of Malkuth, preparing for your journey upward. He is the Lord of the Gates of Matter. An alternative meaning for this card is mirth, joy. The aspirant must try to find joy in his path as he goes along. But interestingly enough, as you transcend consciousness, as you transcend the material world, you begin to see through the illusion and see that it was a grand joke after all. A great joke played on you by the great magician of the universe, veiling you in material incarnation. The path title for this is the Renovating Intelligence, because the Holy God renews by it all the changing things which are renewed by the creation of the world. Renewing intelligence. This is a path of rebirth, a renewal of the aspirant, born out of the paths of the personality, now entering higher spiritual consciousness, preparing for one of the greatest experiences, knowledge and conversation of his holy guardian angel. His holy guardian angel is that part of himself that is unmanifested in this life, unconscious, silent. It is the Yekata, Kether, informing the spirit of each individual, and yet each individual in their everyday life silences this voice. The voices of his ego, his emotions, his body, screaming at him all the time, the demands of the world. Shut this voice off. Now the aspirant will receive help, will receive guidance for the rest of his journey. This is a zodiacal path. We talked about that earlier. There's 12 zodiacal paths, 7 planetary paths, and 4 elemental paths, each one corresponding to a different phase of work that the aspirant will have to accomplish. This path is ruled by Capricorn. It's one of the dark paths, the first sign of winter. It's a cardinal sign, the first onrush of the season. So this also goes back to its title, renewal, because winter is the time of renewal, the end of time of activity, the end of movement as the earth begins to lay fallow, so waiting for renewal. So this is the beginning of complete renewal within the aspirant. The sign of Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, wherein Mars is exalted, finding its highest expression. We talked about that also. The Mars force itself is the electromagnetic force that runs the entire universe through every being, giving motion and life to everything. But in most people, they use this force for procreation and just getting through life, violence, war, lust. The aspirant has now begun to change the direction of this force to higher aspiration. So Mars is exalted because it's finding its highest expression. The Devil card represents both the high and the low. It depends on the aspirant on how they apply this force. The Hebrew letter for this path or this card is Ayin, meaning eye. There's a lot of different meanings here for the eye being referred to. It refers to the Anya chakra being opened, the third eye. It can refer to the eye of Shiva, who opens and destroys a universe, causing rebirth and renewal. It also can refer to the meatus, the opening on the phallus that spews forth the seeds of a new creation. Spelt in full by Gematria, Ayin adds up to 61. A equals 1, Y Yod equals 10, and N Nun equals 50, 61. Other words that add to this number in the Hebrew language are master and Lord, pointing out the mastery of the material world that the aspirant has now achieved. For rising out of Hod, the aspirant has mastered the constructs. He has become a magician, better able to enforce his will or direct his will in his life, and to create new images and new forms for himself. Again, the path of the magician is in the supernal triad. The letter value for this letter, the letter value for Ayin is 70. This is the male creative force. This is one phase of the male creative force that is expressed 3 ways on the tree of life. With Aleph, the Fool, the Hierophant, and the Devil. These are 3 ways that the male creative force manifests in creation. It is also the formula of the Greek god name Yi-Ah-O. On this path, transmuted Mars energies of the aspirant, purified on the path of the tower, Pe, continue to exalt him to higher states of consciousness. This path leaves the dry, intellectual path of Hod, or the Sephira of Hod, and now enters into spiritual ecstasy of the union with one's HGA. The word devil itself comes from the Latin word diablos, meaning adversary. In the esoteric mysteries, the devil means something totally different than it does in Christianity. We understand that we need the adversary. We need obstacles in order to grow. A sword cannot be said to be a sword until it is tempered in battle. And it proves the strength of the sword. Unless the aspirant is tempered in battle by his adversaries, by his obstacles that are placed in his path, which are there for a reason, for your growth. Never deny anything coming at you in your life. Never label things as good or bad. Learn to start thinking about things as just obstacles and lessons to be learned. Why did Spirit put this on your path? And when you approach things like this, you change your attitude toward life. Rather than something bad happening to you, it's another opportunity for growth, because every time you overcome an obstacle, you're stronger and wiser. The devil himself is both the tempter and the redeemer, because this force, the Mars force, is the force used for both procreation and spiritual attainment, depending on how you apply it. This force can give both freedom, as seen on Cruelty's card, with the exalted goat standing on the summit of the world, or bondage, as in Waite's card. In Cruelty's card, the animal energy is exalted and brought under will. The aspirant is now free from bondage to the false forms of the material world. His animal nature is now refocused, redirected. His animal nature and his spiritual nature have now unified. His animal nature has been now brought to obey his spiritual nature, his spiritual will. In Waite's card, the figures are bound to their lower nature by these chains, though they hang very loosely upon the neck of these two beings, signifying that they can break loose anytime they want to. But it's very hard to break loose from the desires of this world. So these cards both show the devil as both adversary and redeemer. Interestingly enough, in Gematria, the Hebrew word nakish, meaning serpent or tempter, and the word Mishik, Messiah, both add to 358, showing that this energy can both destroy and redeem. The renewing intelligence showing the renewal of the new life of the aspirant, the change from bondage and illusion to the freedom of the aspirant to enjoy the material forms without being bound by them. Think about this. Before this point, the aspirant would have been bound to his emotions and his thoughts. He would have been interpreting reality. He would be interpreting the material world around him as reality. But now he sees through the illusion, and it brings him greater joy to see how things are actually working. He has reached a state of inaction, action through inaction. The body acts, but the inner being of the aspirant is calm. One of the alternative meanings for this card, of course, is mirth or joy. Again, we talked about the ability of the aspirant now to see to the illusion and see the great joke of the universe. I'd like to read something that Crowley had to say about this card, his card, in the Book of Thoth, which I also highly recommend for anyone wanting to study these cards. The Book of Thoth is a very complex and hard to understand book, so Crowley was a very deep-minded, and he assumed that everybody had the education he had. So sometimes he's very hard to read. This card represents creative energy in its most material form. In the zodiac, Capricornus occupies the zenith. It is the most exalted of the signs. It is the goat, leaping with lust upon the summit of the earth. Leaping with lust upon the summit of the earth. Now you're no longer a victim of life. You can actually enjoy it. On Crowley's card, you see an obvious reference to the male sexual organ. You see the testes and the phallus. But like we talked about before, the phallus is directed upward into the body of Nuit, into the body of heaven. The Mars force is now redirected to higher aspirations. we talked about earlier, there are two paths that this force can take. And I want to read something else real quick. What Hadith has to say about this in Liber Legis. I am the secret serpent coiled about the spring. In my coiling there is joy. If I lift up my head, I and my nuit are one. If I droop down mine head and shoot forth venom, then is rapture of the earth, and I and the earth are one. Talking about the two directions that this force can take. The serpents on either side of this is the wand of the chief adept, showing that, again, the mastery of the universe. The two serpents on either side, the wand itself represents the Sushumna chakra, the spine. The serpents on either side represent the Ida and Pingala currents that run on either side. And then you have the wings representing spirit, ire, to go, to move. The Ida and Pingala currents on either side of the spine are the moon and sun energies, consciousness and unconsciousness, that unite to direct the serpent energy up the Sushumna, the spine, uniting in the great marriage with the Anya chakra, seen on the goat's forehead, here fully opened. Paul Foster Case taught that there was a crystallization of energy that formed a solid stone within the pineal gland, a structure creating the philosopher's stone. Interestingly enough, the Ida and Pingala currents flow differently in males and females. In the female, they are actually reversed. So this kind of points out a truth in the esoteric sciences about the sexes. The sexes are not homogeneous, is now being falsely taught in our modern society. Again, this is the path where the aspirant has mastered the constructs of Hode, mastery of the material world. On Crowley's card, all these spirals represent the web of weird, or the matrix of the universe that he exists in now. If you've ever seen how the universe is made up, you will understand what I am talking about, the matrix that we live in. Okay. And then in the testes, you see these beings waiting to come forth. They had a major misunderstanding back when Crowley's cards were made about the role of females and males in sexual procreation. So, in Crowley's card, the testes contain all these forms waiting to be brought into the world by the aspirant. New constructs, new creation. They're waiting to be brought forth in accordance to the will of the aspirant. Again, now things are coming into your life through will instead of just haphazardly, or what seemed haphazardly to you at that time. Now you'll have a greater understanding about these things. Interestingly enough, the path opposite is the path of death, Scorpio. Life and death. These two dance, for one gives birth to the other. Through death comes life, and through life comes death. In Wade's card, we see the devil on the cube. It's actually a half cube, representing half knowledge. He's sitting on top of this cube, showing him as the material world's master. He holds a torch downward, meaning the light is still hidden in the refuse of the material world. One hand pointing up and the other down refers to as above, so below. He is actually pointing the way. If you've ever seen Eliphas Levi's image of Baphomet, which this symbol is based on, by the way, and by the way, Baphomet means baptism in wisdom. So it's not a bad sign. It means baptism of wisdom. If you look closely at the diagram, there's a lot Baphomet is the attained individual, the animal-made God, which we are. Exactly that on this path. But on Eliphas Levi's image of Baphomet, one arm says salva, the other coagula, referring to the two processes of alchemy, to dissolve and to coagulate, which also refers to these two paths that we will be talking about later. The path of the lovers, salve, and the path of art, coagula. The inverted pentagram on the devil's hand, on the devil's forehead, just merely refers again to spirit submerged in matter. The aspirant is now making it a upright pentagram. In Waite's card again, the man's tail as a flame can represent the Mars force in its lowest expression. Also, one of the meanings for the name of Adam in Hebrew and some of the spelling means fire. This one can also refer to the fires of the tree of life. The woman's figure's tail shows fruit, grapes, or I believe they're grapes, representing the fruits of the tree of knowledge, temptation, and the sweetness of the material world that lures the aspirant in. Waite made bat's wings and the horns, of course, to symbolize the animal nature, being exalted. Crowley's horns are spiraled, showing the spiral force of creation, manifestation. Just a quick note on something I have not addressed in this class about sex. The wasting of sexual energy is very detrimental to the spiritual aspirant. Excessive masturbation and excessive sex with physical orgasm can drain the aspirant's Mars force, his prana, his vril. In women who absorb the energy of the male, it is crucial to make sure that you are not having sex with weak and mentally imbalanced individuals. Often you see women who are very sexually active become mentally imbalanced over time. The wand, the phallus, informs the cup, the vulva. You, as women, absorb a lot more than just the semen of the man. You absorb his energy, his thoughts, and his emotions, as does any child that is conceived. Every sexual act gives birth to something, though you may not know what that something was. You will see the effects in your life, though you may not always be aware of it. In today's society, there's too much misuse of sexual energy. Sexual energy is divine energy. And I want to read another little short passage out of Liber Legis in the book of Nuit. Also, take your fill and will of love as ye will, when, where, and with whom ye will, but always unto me. This statement is stating that you must remember that the sexual act is a divine act and should be treated as such. Okay, well, let's take a few minutes here just to go over the attributions